The sun was just beginning to set over Oakhaven, casting golden streaks across the neatly trimmed lawns and rows of perfectly painted mailboxes. But on the edge of the community garden, something was horribly out of place. A black trash bag, torn open at the seams, revealing sharp, colorful shards scattered across the grass like shattered dreams. Bits of blue glass, mosaic tiles, plastic butterflies, glitter-dusted buttons, all jumbled together like confetti after a funeral. Maya stood over it, unmoving, her arms tightly wrapped around her chest, lower lip quivering. Her sketchbook dangled loosely from her fingertips, the pages flapping in the wind. Rosa rushed forward, slowing only when she saw her daughter's eyes, wide, hollow, wet. "Maya," she whispered, bending down. "What happened?" But Maya couldn't speak. She just pointed with one trembling finger toward the trash bag, then to the wall beside the garden where her artwork had once proudly hung, now scraped clean, the bolts where the frame once rested still bare and gleaming. That wall had held her soul, her creation, her mosaic, and now it was gone. Across the walkway, Karen Whitmore stood in her powder blue blouse and sensible heels, arms folded like a judge, awaiting applause. Her expression wasn't angry. It was bored, like she had just swatted away a bug. Behind her, a landscaper shoved the rest of the debris into a second trash bag, careful not to make eye contact. Rosa rose slowly, fury twisting her stomach into knots. Did you destroy her project?" she asked, voice already breaking. Karen didn't flinch. "The color scheme was disruptive," she said coolly. "This is a curated space, not a carnival." Rosa's mouth fell open. It was art. It was her voice. Karen offered a thin smile, the kind you give to a child misbehaving in public. It clashed with the overall community aesthetic. Bright reds? Neon purples? We follow a muted palette for a reason. Harmony matters. Maya knelt beside the bag, silently gathering the pieces with shaking hands. A pink tile sliced her thumb, and she whimpered, but didn't stop. Her whole body trembled as she tried to pick up a piece shaped like a sunflower, her favorite, now cracked in half. Rosa knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, shielding her from Karen's gaze. "You had no right," she hissed, eyes never leaving her daughter. "This was approved by the school. The board signed off on it. You had no right." Karen shrugged. It wasn't up to standard. Silence fell. For a moment, all that could be heard was the whisper of wind and the quiet clink of broken glass being cradled by a child too heartbroken to cry. Rosa helped Maya to her feet, holding her close as the light faded and Karen turned away without another word. And as they stood there, mother and daughter in a garden now too quiet, too clean, too curated, Rosa whispered aloud to no one and everyone, "Since when did joy need to match a color palette?" Maya was born on a rainy morning in early May, her name chosen long before Rosa ever held her. Maya, which meant illusion in Sanskrit and spring in Hebrew. And somehow both meanings fit. From the moment she opened her eyes, Maya lived between worlds. One foot in our reality, the other dancing somewhere the rest of us couldn't see. She didn't speak for the first 6 years of her life. Doctors offered labels: autism spectrum disorder, sensory integration dysfunction, but none of them captured the fullness of her spirit. She wasn't broken or absent. She simply communicated differently. She noticed things other people ignored. She would sit in the grass for hours, watching how the wind moved through wildflowers, how shadows shifted with passing clouds. Her silence was not emptiness. It was observation, thought, color. Art became her first language. It started with finger paints. While other toddlers smeared for fun, Maya created shapes, vivid, balanced, intentional. At age 4, she began arranging beads and buttons into swirling galaxies on the carpet. By 6, she was building paper collages, so intricate that even seasoned art teachers paused. Bright colors calmed her. They gave her a sense of control in a world that often felt too loud, too sharp, too chaotic. Red made her feel strong. Yellow made her feel seen. Blues were her lullabies. She never explained these things aloud. She didn't have to. Her creations were her explanations. Rosa, a former high school art teacher turned single mother, understood more than most. When her husband died in a car accident shortly after Maya's second birthday, grief wrapped itself around her like a second skin. But Maya's quiet presence was a lighthouse. Rosa would sit beside her daughter at the dining room table, watching her glue sequins onto paper while the world outside spun too fast. It was in those quiet hours that Rosa realized her daughter didn't need to be changed, she needed to be understood. She wasn't less than for not fitting into neat neurotypical boxes. She was more sensitive, more expressive, more alive in ways others had forgotten how to be. They had lived in a small apartment in a noisy part of the city, but after a string of sleepless nights and public meltdowns caused by overstimulation, Rosa decided they needed a new start. A place with trees, with peace, with space for Maya's voice, her true voice, to take root. Oak Haven looked perfect on paper. Quiet streets, safe sidewalks, a tight-knit community that boasted family values, and a zero-tolerance policy for disruption. Rosa took that as a promise of peace. She didn't realize until later that it was also a warning. At first, things were fine. Maya blossomed in the yard, building tiny fairy gardens and covering their back fence with chalk murals that changed with the seasons. Neighbors smiled politely. A few complimented her creativity. But Rosa began to notice the way Karen Whitmore's eyes narrowed when she passed their house. The way friendly reminders about HOA policies always seemed to arrive after Maya's more colorful creations appeared in public view. Wind chimes were deemed too loud. Sidewalk chalk was called graffiti. A handmade wreath with rainbow ribbons was cited as inconsistent with community tones. Still, Rosa stayed hopeful. Maya had started humming more. She began using short words. At 7, she whispered, "Thank you," when someone complimented her art. At 8, she began writing captions under her drawings. Each small step felt like a miracle. So, when the neighborhood announced a Community Kids Art Day, Rosa saw a rare opportunity, a chance for Maya to feel like she belonged, not in spite of her difference, but because of it. Maya worked on her mosaic for weeks. She titled it Voices Without Sound. It was a riot of color, bright reds for strength, yellows for connection, greens for peace, and blues for stillness. It was her story, told without a single spoken word. Rosa helped her mount it on a wooden frame and carefully delivered it to the HOA's designated display wall near the garden path. It hung there for 2 days, and then, without warning, it was gone. The Oak Haven Homeowners Association was less a community and more a carefully choreographed illusion, one where beauty came with rules and belonging came with silence. The lawns were always clipped to perfection, the flower beds approved in muted shades of beige, lavender, and white. Even seasonal decorations had to complement the overall aesthetic. Colorful bird feeders? Denied. Bright ceramic pots? Rejected. The HOA wasn't just about order, it was about image. An image that had no room for vibrance, or as they like to call it, visual noise. That obsession was enforced by Karen Whitmore, the longtime chair of the HOA Design and Standards Committee. She was a woman of precision, always in pastel slacks and pearl earrings, always armed with a clipboard and a smile so tight it looked painful. Her eyes never missed a detail. A hose left uncoiled? Fined. A flag outside of approved neutral tones? Cited. And if you dared to appeal a violation, she quoted policy so quickly and coldly it felt like being cross-examined in court. Rosa had tried to give her the benefit of the doubt when they first moved in. But Karen made her feelings known in the way that HOA leaders often do, through thinly veiled memos and quietly devastating fines. The first came just a week after Rosa and Maya moved in. A notice taped to their door stated that their mailbox, hand-painted in soft blue by Maya with tiny sunflowers along the side, did not meet Oak Haven color code standards and must be repainted in harmony with the approved community palette. Rosa repainted it beige, her hands shaking with rage the entire time. Then came the wind chimes, simple wooden tubes with colorful beads Maya had strung herself, each one representing a different emotion. Maya loved to sit on the porch and watch them spin, the beads catching the light. But Karen sent an official warning: auditory disturbances may disrupt neighborhood tranquility. The chimes had to go. When Rosa reached out to explain Maya's condition, the importance of color and sound to her sensory regulation, Karen responded with a carefully worded email. While we sympathize with your family's unique challenges, Oak Haven must consider the comfort and visual cohesion of the entire community. From that point forward, Karen's scrutiny intensified. Maya's sidewalk chalk drawings violated concrete cleanliness standards. A rainbow pinwheel in their front yard was distracting to drivers. Rosa soon realized that any trace of Maya's creativity was seen not as a gift, but as a threat. Neighbors stayed silent. Some even agreed, quietly telling Rosa things like, "I'm sure your daughter means well, but maybe keep it inside." Rosa wanted to fight back, but she also wanted peace, safety, space for Maya to grow without confrontation. So she kept her head down and tried to work within the rules. She thought she could find a balance between expression and acceptance, but Karen Whitmore didn't believe in balance. She believed in control. And when Maya's mosaic appeared, bursting with color, life, and joy, Karen saw it not as a triumph of a child overcoming silence, but as an act of rebellion, something to be removed, hidden, destroyed. And in Oak Haven, once Karen decided something didn't belong, there were no second chances. It started with a single blue tile, smooth, curved, and slightly cracked. Maya found it during one of her walks around the garden beds behind their house, where discarded items sometimes hid beneath the soil. She picked it up with delicate fingers and held it to the sunlight. It shimmered. It sang, not out loud, but in a way only Maya could hear. That's how most of her art began, not with a plan, but with a color that spoke to her. That tile became the center of everything. When the HOA announced Community Kids Art Day, Rosa's heart jumped. It was rare that Oak Haven encouraged anything child-centered, and rarer still that they opened community space to something as messy as creativity. Karen's flyer made it clear submissions had to be displayed on one of the community art boards near the garden path. Modest in tone and theme, it read, "Family-friendly and harmonious with the neighborhood aesthetic." Rosa hesitated, but Maya's eyes lit up at the word art. It was the first time she'd shown excitement about something outside their home in weeks. Rosa knew what that meant. It was time for another project. Maya decided on a mosaic. She gathered scraps for days, bits of glass from broken cups, old ceramic fragments Rosa had saved from a shattered teapot, buttons from a tin inherited from her grandmother, bottle caps from juice boxes. Nothing expensive, nothing store-bought, just color, history, texture. Rosa took her to the local recycling center, where Maya picked through discarded tiles and plastics like they were treasure. She chose each piece by instinct, by sound, by how they felt in her palm. She laid them out on the floor, like puzzle pieces, whispering little thoughts to herself, humming low and slow as she worked. Rosa helped with the frame, just a simple wooden backing, weatherproofed with care. But the arrangement, the design, the meaning, that was all Maya. She called it Voices Without Sound. Rosa nearly cried when she read the title. It was the first time Maya had ever named her own work. The mosaic told a story. Swirls of deep blues wrapped around rising oranges and golds, soft greens curved upward like growing vines. Tiny mirrored pieces scattered throughout like stars. There was no order, no symmetry. And yet it was perfectly Maya, expressive, bold, vulnerable. The day they delivered it to the HOA display board, Maya carried the mosaic herself, arms trembling slightly under the weight, but her chin lifted with pride. Rosa had received email confirmation from the HOA admin that all pieces would be reviewed, and the artboard was ready for mounting. She even printed out a small label with Maya's name and the title of the piece. As they secured it to the display, Maya touched each corner, whispering something Rosa couldn't hear. A ritual, a goodbye, or maybe just a promise. For 2 days, they visited it together. After school, Maya would walk to the display, sit quietly in front of it, and study it like a mirror. Sometimes other kids walked by and smiled. A few parents nodded politely. No one said much, but no one complained. Rosa let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Oakhaven could learn to make space for color. Maya began drawing again. She started sketching her next project. She even spoke a few words to Rosa over dinner, about tiles, about trees, about more. But on the third day, everything was gone. The display board was wiped clean. No note, no warning. Only the bolts remained where voices without sound had once hung, and a black trash bag split open beneath the bench. Rosa didn't think much of it at first. It was a Thursday afternoon, and the weather was gentle, clear skies, soft wind. She held Maya's hand as they walked the familiar path from school to the community garden as they had done the past 2 days. Maya's steps were light, almost bouncy, her sketchbook tucked under one arm, her other hand clinging to her mother's fingers. She was humming soft and slow, what Rosa had come to recognize as her happy hum. Each note made Rosa's heart swell. After everything, this little girl, her little girl, had found her voice in color. They turned the corner, approaching the wooden display board, where voices without sound had been mounted. But something felt off. The space looked too bare, too clean. Maya's humming stopped. Rosa followed her gaze and froze. The mosaic was gone. In its place was a fresh coat of paint covering the wall, hastily done. The bolts where the artwork had been mounted were still there. But the frame, the tiles, the vibrant life that had once danced across that board vanished. Just beneath the board, a black garbage bag sat bloated and ripped open, its contents spilling out like entrails. A cracked green tile, a crumpled corner of the wooden frame, a shattered button for Maya's rainbow collection. And standing beside it was Karen. She wore her usual press blouse, clipboard in hand, supervising a landscaper who was sweeping the remnants into a dustpan like it was yard waste. She didn't flinch as Rosa approached, didn't blink, just tapped her pen on the clipboard and muttered something to the man before turning her eyes, sharp, flat, unmoved, toward them. Rosa stepped in front of Maya instinctively, her voice trembling but firm. "Where is it?" she asked. "Where's my daughter's mosaic?" Karen sighed, as if she'd been inconvenienced by a question she had no patience to answer. "It was removed," she said. "It didn't comply with display standards. This isn't a daycare gallery." Her colors clashed with the HOA palette. Rosa's mouth fell open. "You what?" "It's in violation," Karen continued calmly. "Unauthorized hues, unapproved materials. The display board is meant to reflect community values, not chaos." Behind Rosa, Maya began to shake. She dropped her sketchbook. Her breathing grew shallow, fast. Her hands flew up to her ears, fingers digging in as her knees buckled beneath her. A low, guttural sound escaped her lips, like an animal trying to keep from crying out. Rosa turned just in time to catch her, before she collapsed completely, holding her tight as Maya screamed into her chest. It was a meltdown, a full body crash. Rosa rocked her gently, whispering her name, but Maya couldn't hear her. She was lost, spiraling inside a world too cruel, too confusing to make sense of. Her safe space had been destroyed. Her expression was not sadness, it was terror. And Karen? She didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just watched, then scribbled something down on her clipboard and murmured to the landscaper, "Clean this up before sunset." A few houses away, someone stood on their porch, holding up their phone, filming. They didn't say anything. They didn't stop it. They didn't help. Rosa lifted Maya into her arms and stood, her back trembling under the weight of both child and fury. "You had no right," she hissed. It was approved. It was her voice. Karen's face remained neutral, and it was an eyesore. Rosa didn't reply. She couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Not because she lacked the rage, but because in that moment, all of it was too much. The heartbreak, the humiliation, the helplessness. She turned and carried Maya home. Later that night, as Maya lay curled on the couch with her sketchbook unopened beside her, Rosa stared at the broken pieces she had managed to collect from the trash. A corner of a yellow sun, the cracked blue tile that had started it all. She held them in her hands and wept. Because it wasn't just a mosaic they had broken, it was a child's language, and someone with a title and a clipboard had deemed it unworthy of being seen. The next morning, Rosa walked into the HOA office with Maya's broken tile in her hand and fire in her chest. She wasn't shaking this time. She wasn't crying. She was done begging for respect. The office sat behind the clubhouse, quiet and sterile, with beige walls and picture-perfect model homes framed on every side. A receptionist in a stiff gray sweater greeted her with a plastic smile that faltered when Rosa laid the cracked mosaic tile on the counter and said, "I want to speak to someone about what Karen Whitmore did to my daughter's artwork." After a few hushed calls behind closed doors, one of the HOA board members, a middle-aged man named Glenn with too much cologne and not enough empathy, agreed to meet her in the conference room. Rosa laid out the facts. Maya's project had been pre-approved. The materials were safe, the location was official, and the display had been accepted by the board. She held up a printed copy of the approval email. "So, tell me," she demanded, "under what authority did Karen remove it, and why wasn't I notified?" Glenn sighed, flipping through a folder he clearly hadn't looked at until that moment. "Mrs. Alvarez," he began, "we understand your frustration, but the board has reviewed the situation and determined that Karen acted within her rights as the Design and Standards Committee chair. According to Article 3, Section 9, unapproved public art with excessive color variance may be subject to immediate removal if it is deemed inconsistent with community design themes." Rosa blinked. "Excessive color variance?" "Yes," he said. "It was flagged for noncompliance with the neutral tone standard we use for community-facing elements." "You mean," Rosa said slowly, "it was too bright?" Glenn didn't answer. He didn't have to. Rosa stood, heart pounding. "You knew she had no real reason to take it down. You just didn't want to go against her. And you're hiding behind vague policies to avoid saying what this really is: discrimination." Glenn swallowed hard. "The board doesn't comment on individual motives." That was when a quiet voice spoke from behind her. "I wouldn't have approved the removal if I'd known," said Lisa, one of the newer board members, standing at the doorway with a folder clutched to her chest. She looked tired, hesitant. Karen never filed a request to take it down. She just told maintenance to do it. No vote, no notice. I only found out after it was already in the trash." Rosa turned to her, stunned. "Are you saying this wasn't even sanctioned?" Lisa nodded. Off the record, she said it looked like a preschool explosion. She didn't even look at the nameplate. She didn't know it was your daughter's work. Rosa's hands shook as she picked up the broken tile. She knew. She just didn't care. And with that, she walked out, because now she had something more powerful than policy. She had the truth, and she was going to make sure the world heard it. Rosa didn't waste a single breath. The moment she walked out of that HOA conference room, she stopped being a quiet mother trying to keep the peace and became a woman on a mission. Because what Karen had done wasn't just heartless, it was illegal. She went home, sat at her kitchen table with the broken pieces of Maya's mosaic spread before her like sacred relics, and began her campaign, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. She would not let her daughter grow up thinking her art, her expression, her existence could be swept into a trash bag to protect someone else's comfort. Her first step was filing a formal complaint with the Americans with Disabilities Act office, citing the destruction of a medically approved art installation tied directly to her child's therapy and self-expression. She attached the documentation: Maya's diagnosis, her therapist's letter recommending artistic expression, the email approval from the HOA for the installation. She also reached out to the local inclusion council, explaining how an HOA official destroyed a disabled child's work without a vote, warning, or due process. They responded within 48 hours. They were listening. Next came the petition. Rosa launched it online with the title, "Let Kids Create Freely, Protect Neurodivergent Expression in Public Spaces." She uploaded photos of Maya's mosaic before and after the destruction, paired with a short but powerful description of what had happened. No names, no attacks, just truth. Within a day, the petition had 2,000 signatures. By the end of the week, it had 25,000. Art teachers from across the county began posting about Maya. Several shared their own students' experiences with discrimination, with being told their work was too bold, too weird, too much. One teacher reposted the petition with the caption, "Art is language." This child was silenced for speaking in color. Rosa began receiving messages from strangers, parents, teachers, therapists, thanking her, encouraging her, sharing similar stories. A local disability advocacy group reached out, offering pro bono legal assistance if she wanted to escalate the case. A nationally recognized artist who grew up neurodivergent posted a video tribute to Maya, showing their own childhood art that had once been thrown away for being inappropriate. The video received over 2 million views in 3 days. And then the email leak arrived. It came from a blocked account. No name, no subject line, just a screenshot and 5 words. "You should have this too." The screenshot was from Karen Whitmore's internal HOA email. In it, she wrote to another board member, "That thing looked like garbage glued to a wall. If we let every special needs kid tack their therapy mess on our garden wall, we'll look like a psych ward. I handled it." Rosa felt her stomach turn. She stared at the screen, the bile rising in her throat, not just from the cruelty, but from the casualness of it. The entitlement. Karen hadn't made a mistake. She hadn't acted out of misunderstanding or misplaced rules. She had deliberately destroyed a disabled child's expression, and worse, she had mocked her for it. Rosa added the email to her complaint file. She forwarded it to the ADA investigator and the local inclusion council. And then she made a choice. She posted it. She blocked out the other recipient's name, but she let Karen's words speak for themselves. No commentary. Just, "This is what my daughter's artwork meant to her. You decide who belongs in this neighborhood." It exploded. Local news stations ran segments on the story. HOA member destroys disabled child's art, calls it garbage. Advocacy groups mobilized even harder. Calls to the HOA tripled. Residents began attending board meetings in protest. Some neighbors who had once stayed silent apologized to Rosa in person. Others spoke out for the first time about Karen's history, her pattern of exclusion, her abuse of aesthetic enforcement. Under the pressure, the HOA board issued a public statement. "We are launching an internal review of all display policies and volunteer conduct. The actions taken against the Alvarez family do not reflect the values of Oakhaven." It was too late for damage control, because by then, the whole community had seen the truth. And they weren't just backing Rosa. They were backing Maya. A child whose silence had once kept her invisible was now leading a movement. The media firestorm ignited like dry grass in summer. Within a week of Rosa posting Karen's leaked email, local outlets ran the headline, "HOA official destroys disabled child's artwork, calls it garbage and a psych ward mess." By the following Monday, it wasn't just a local story. National news picked it up. Major networks ran segments showing side-by-side images of Maya's vibrant mosaic and the trash bag it was later found in. The contrast spoke louder than any commentary. People were outraged, not just artists, not just disability advocates, but parents, teachers, students. Hundreds of artists across the country began recreating versions of Maya's mosaic in her style, fractured colors, swirling joy, broken bits arranged into something breathtaking. They posted them online using hashtags like hashtag Mosaic for Maya, hashtag Color is a Communication, and hashtag Art is Not Garbage. One artist in Chicago hung a full installation in his gallery titled Voices Without Sound, Tribute to Maya. It featured recycled objects donated by neurodivergent children across the country. Then came the wave of calls, emails, and public outcry directed at the HOA. Residents demanded emergency meetings. Petitions were brought forward demanding Karen's immediate resignation. The Oakhaven board tried to hold firm at first, claiming they were investigating and that they would review the complaint fairly. But the pressure didn't ease. It built. People weren't just angry, they were watching. Under the mounting scrutiny, the board finally released a statement. While Ms. Whitmore has served the community for many years, the recent controversy surrounding her conduct has caused disruption and division. For the sake of community peace and progress, she has chosen to step down from all HOA-related duties effective immediately. There was no apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a quiet resignation, wrapped in formality. Karen disappeared from public view after that. Her blind stayed shut, her house dark. Rumors swirled about her trying to sell. But Rosa didn't care where she went. Because Maya's mosaic, her voice, had already done more than Karen ever expected. It had united people. It had sparked a national conversation. And it had forced a community to look at itself, really look, and decide what kind of place it wanted to be. The HOA, under new pressure, established a temporary art inclusion committee. Rosa was invited to be a consultant. So were two special education teachers, a therapist, and a parent of a child with Down syndrome. For the first time in its history, Oak Haven began rewriting its design rules, not just for uniformity, but for inclusion. And Maya? She began smiling again. She didn't speak much about what happened, but she started creating again, her sketchbook filled with colors. And one evening, she drew a new mosaic design. It had a bright blue tile in the center, the same kind she had started her first one with. She called it Still Here. A month after the storm passed, a letter arrived from the city's cultural arts director. Rosa opened it with cautious curiosity, but by the time she finished reading, her hands trembled, not with anger this time, but disbelief. The local children's art museum wanted to feature Maya's work in an upcoming exhibit titled Color is Voice. They had seen the viral story, read Maya's title, Voices Without Sound, and believed it belonged in a place where people could learn, feel, and understand what art really means to a child who sees the world differently. Rosa read the letter aloud to Maya that night, her voice shaking. Maya said nothing, just looked down at her sketchbook and drew a single tile, bright yellow, surrounded by blue. Soon after, another surprise arrived, this time from City Hall. A downtown mural project was seeking designs that reflected resilience, inclusion, and beauty. One of the lead organizers had been following Maya's story from the beginning. She asked if Maya would be willing to submit a concept. Rosa hesitated, unsure how Maya would respond. But when she gently asked her, Maya nodded, picked up her markers, and went to work. The mural was unveiled 2 months later on the side of the city library. A massive, joyful mosaic-style painting inspired directly by Maya's original piece. It didn't replicate it, it echoed it. Spirals of color, mismatched tiles, glittering edges, playful chaos. The title, in bold white paint along the base, read, Still Here, designed by Maya Alvarez, age 9. People from every part of town came to see it. Children pointed. Parents cried. Teachers brought entire classrooms to learn how something once called garbage had become a city's treasure. Back in Oak Haven, the changes were slower, but real. The HOA announced the formation of a new Inclusive Arts Review Committee, where every child's submission would be reviewed by a panel that included teachers, parents, and at least one representative from the neurodivergent community. Public art guidelines were rewritten. The phrase visual harmony was replaced with creative inclusion. Rosa, once seen as that difficult mom, now served as an advisor on the board, not to tame her voice, but to amplify it. And at home, Rosa took the final broken tile, the very first one Maya had found, the blue curve that started it all, and placed it in a small wooden frame. She hung it on the front porch, just beside the doorbell, where the wind could catch the glass and send little reflections bouncing across the front yard. One afternoon, a neighbor passed by with their young daughter. The girl paused, pointed at the tile, and asked, "Who made that?" From behind the screen door, Maya answered quietly but clearly, "I did." Rosa smiled, and this time, no one told her it didn't match. Just when things finally felt still, when the noise had faded, the policies had changed, and Maya had returned to her art, another envelope arrived. This one wasn't from a museum or an admirer. It was from a law firm. Inside, a letter, stiff, formal, threatening. Karen Whitmore was suing for emotional distress, loss of reputation, and damages resulting from public defamation. She claimed the viral story had caused irreparable harm, and that her decades of service to the community had been unjustly ruined. Rosa stared at the letter, stunned not by its contents, but by the delusion. Karen was still trying to silence them, still trying to erase Maya. But what she didn't understand was, you can't sue away the truth. And this time, Rosa wasn't just fighting back. She was building a case. Backhand index pointing right in the next episode. Karen takes the fight to court, but the testimony that brings the courtroom to tears won't come from Rosa, it'll come from Maya.